The gunshots echoed across the desert canyon, and Eleanor Zimmerman hitched her skirts higher as she ran, her lungs burning with each desperate breath she drew into her chest. 3 men on horseback thundered behind her, their shouts crude and threatening as they closed the distance between them. She had been traveling alone from Missouri to meet her aunt in San Antonio, Texas, but the stagecoach had been ambushed 2 days prior, and she had been the only passenger to escape into the unforgiving landscape of 1878 Texas. Her green traveling dress, already dusty from days of hiding and running, caught on a jagged branch of mesquite as she scrambled down a rocky slope. The fabric tore with a sickening sound, ripping from hem to thigh, but Eleanor did not stop. She could not stop. The men behind her wanted more than just her money, and she would rather die in this wilderness than face what they intended, her vision blurred with exhaustion and fear, as she stumbled over loose rocks, her hands scraping against rough stone as she caught herself from falling. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and sweat plastered her dark blonde hair to her face and neck. Just when she thought her legs would give out entirely, when the sound of hoofbeats seemed close enough that she could feel their breath, a single rifle shot cracked through the air. It was different from the wild shooting of her pursuers, purposeful and precise. One of the men behind her cursed loudly, and Eleanor risked a glance over her shoulder to see them reining in their horses, staring up at a ridge to the east. A figure sat atop a paint horse on that ridge, silhouetted against the bright sky, rifle still raised. Even from this distance, there was something commanding about his stillness, something that made the 3 outlaws reconsider their chase. Another warning shot kicked up dust directly in front of the lead horse, making it rear. The men exchanged words she could not hear, then wheeled their mounts around and galloped back the way they had come, clearly deciding that one woman was not worth facing an unknown marksman who could shoot like that. Eleanor's knees buckled and she collapsed against a boulder, her whole body shaking. She pressed her torn dress against her exposed leg, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was, how completely undone. The sound of hooves approached from above, steady and unhurried, and she looked up to see the rider descending the slope with practiced ease. As he drew closer, she could make out details. A man perhaps 26 or 27 years old, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his worn hat, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes the color of Texas sky in winter, pale blue and piercing. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, dusty leather chaps over denim, a faded shirt, and a vest. A bandana hung loosely around his neck, and his rifle rested across his saddle with the ease of someone who knew how to use it well. He dismounted several feet away, perhaps sensing that she was already frightened enough without him looming over her. "Madam," he said, his voice low and gentle, surprising her with its kindness. "Those men won't be back today, but we should not stay here come nightfall. Are you hurt?" Eleanor tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She shook her head instead, though everything hurt, though her hands were bleeding and her dress was ruined and she had no idea where she was or how she would survive. He studied her for a moment, those blue eyes taking in her condition with what seemed like genuine concern. Then he walked back to his horse and retrieved a canteen. He approached slowly, the way one might approach a spooked animal, and offered it to her. "Drink slowly," he advised. "You look like you have been running a while." She took the canteen with trembling hands and did as he suggested, though every instinct screamed at her to gulp the water down. It was warm but tasted like salvation. When she finally lowered the canteen, she found her voice. "Thank you. They have been chasing me since yesterday morning. I thought I lost them, but they picked up my trail again." His jaw tightened. "I know those men. Cattle rustlers and worse out of Laredo. You are lucky I was tracking a lost mare through here." He glanced at the sky, calculating the time. "My camp is about an hour's ride north. Can you ride?" Eleanor looked at his horse, then down at her torn dress and exhausted body. "I do not know. I can try." "That will have to do," he said, but there was no harshness in it. "My name is Vincent Keller. I work a ranch about 15 miles east of here." "What is your name, and what are you doing out here alone?" "Eleanor Zimmerman," she managed. "I was traveling to San Antonio to live with my aunt. The stagecoach was attacked. The driver was killed, and the other guard told me to run while he held them off. I do not know if he survived." Vincent's expression darkened. "When was this?" "2 days ago, maybe 3. I have lost track of time." He nodded slowly, processing this information. "There is a trading post about 20 miles south. I will take you there tomorrow and we can get word to the sheriff in San Antonio. But tonight we camp. Can you stand?" Eleanor pushed herself upright, using the boulder for support. Her legs shook, but they held. Vincent moved closer and offered his arm, which she took gratefully. Up close, she noticed details she had missed before. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the calluses on his hands, the way he smelled of leather and sage and horse, earthy and real. He was taller than she had realized, probably 6 feet and solidly built in the way of men who worked hard for their living. He helped her to his horse, a beautiful paint gelding with intelligent eyes. "His name is Partner," Vincent said. "He is gentle. I am going to help you up, all right." She nodded, and he lifted her into the saddle with surprising ease, his hands respectful and quick. Then he swung up behind her, reaching around to take the reins. Eleanor stiffened at first, uncomfortable with the intimacy of the position, but exhaustion quickly overwhelmed propriety. As they began to ride, she found herself leaning back against his solid warmth, her eyes drifting closed despite her best efforts to stay alert. "Sleep if you need to," Vincent said quietly. "I have got you." She wanted to protest that she did not know him, that this was all highly improper, that a lady of 22 should not be alone with a strange man in the wilderness. But those concerns seemed distant and absurd given everything that had happened. So Eleanor let herself relax, let the steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the security of Vincent's arms around her lull her into a state between sleep and waking. True to his word, they reached his camp as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. It was a simple setup beneath a stand of live oaks near a small spring, just a bedroll, some supplies, and the remains of a morning fire. Vincent dismounted first, then helped Eleanor down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet touched the ground, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Sit," he instructed, guiding her to a flat rock near the fire pit. "I will get this fire going and make some coffee. When did you last eat?" Eleanor had to think about it. "The morning of the attack. I had some hardtack and jerky I salvaged from the coach, but I finished that yesterday." Vincent shook his head but did not comment. He moved around the camp with efficient purpose, building up the fire, setting a battered coffee pot on to boil, pulling supplies from his saddlebags. Eleanor watched him work, noting the easy competence in his movements. This was a man comfortable in the wilderness, completely at home in this harsh landscape that had nearly killed her. As the fire crackled to life, warmth began to seep into her bones, chasing away the chill that had settled there. Vincent produced some dried meat, hardtack, and surprisingly, a couple of slightly wrinkled apples. "It is not much," he said, offering her the food, "but it will keep you going until we reach the trading post tomorrow." "It is wonderful," Eleanor said sincerely, biting into an apple with an enthusiasm that would have horrified her mother. Sweet juice flooded her mouth, and she almost moaned with relief. Vincent looked away, busying himself with the coffee, and she wondered if she had embarrassed him. They ate in companionable silence as full darkness fell and stars began to emerge overhead. More stars than Eleanor had ever seen in her life, spread across the sky like diamonds scattered on black velvet. The night sounds of the desert rose around them. The distant cry of a coyote, the chirp of crickets, the soft movement of small creatures in the brush. It should have frightened her, but with the fire warm and Vincent nearby, she felt safer than she had in days. "Tell me about your aunt," Vincent said eventually, pouring coffee into a tin cup and offering it to her. "The one in San Antonio." Eleanor wrapped her cold hands around the cup, grateful for its warmth. "Her name is Martha. She is my mother's sister. My parents died last winter, fever that swept through our town in Missouri. I had no other family there, no prospects for work. Aunt Martha wrote and offered me a home. She runs a boarding house and said she could use the help." She paused, staring into the fire. "I left with such hope. Everything I owned was in my trunk on that coach. Now I have nothing but this torn dress and the memory of violence." Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "You have your life," he said finally. "That counts for more than any trunk of belongings. Things can be replaced." "I suppose that is true," Eleanor acknowledged. "Though it does not solve my immediate problem. I can hardly arrive at my aunt's door looking like this, and I have no money to replace anything. The outlaws took my reticule." "We will figure something out," Vincent said with a certainty that made her want to believe him. "San Antonio is a growing city. There will be opportunities for someone willing to work hard, and your aunt will just be grateful you are alive." Eleanor studied him across the fire. "Why did you help me? You could have ridden on, left me to my fate. Most men would have." He looked up at her, those blue eyes catching the firelight. "Most men are not worth much then. My mother raised me to believe that when you see someone in trouble, you help. No calculations, no asking what is in it for you, you just help. That is what decent people do. Your mother sounds like a wise woman." A shadow crossed his face. "She died 5 years back, thrown from a horse." "I am sorry," Eleanor said softly, "and your father never knew him. He left when I was too young to remember. Ma raised me and my sister on her own, working as a seamstress and taking in laundry. My sister Sarah married a farmer up in Austin. She has 3 children now." His expression softened at the mention of them. "I see them when I can, but ranch work keeps me busy most of the year." "You work for someone else's ranch." "For now," Vincent said. "Been saving my wages for 6 years. Another 2 years, maybe 3, and I will have enough to buy my own piece of land. Nothing huge, but enough for a small herd, room to build a decent house. That is the dream, anyway." There was something touching about the quiet determination in his voice, the patient working toward a distant goal. Eleanor found herself wanting to know more about this man who had appeared like an answer to a prayer, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves. She could barely keep her eyes open. Vincent noticed. "You need to sleep. Take my bedroll. I will keep watch tonight." "I cannot take your bed," Eleanor protested weakly. "You can and will," he said firmly. "Those men might not come back, but I am not taking chances. Besides, I have spent plenty of nights sleeping sitting up. One more will not kill me." He spread the bedroll closer to the fire and waited until she lay down, her body sinking into the blankets with profound relief. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Vincent settling against a tree, rifle across his lap, silhouetted against the star-filled sky like a guardian from some ancient story. Eleanor woke once in the deep night, disoriented and cold despite the blankets. The fire had burned low, and for a moment of pure panic, she thought she was alone. Then she saw Vincent still awake, feeding another piece of wood to the flames. He looked over and saw she was awake. "Just the wind picking up," he said quietly. "Go back to sleep." But she noticed him shrug out of his vest and move closer. "Your dress is torn pretty badly," he observed, keeping his voice low. "If you are cold, I could mend it while you rest. I have a sewing kit in my pack. Ma made sure I knew how to repair my own clothes." Eleanor was too tired to feel embarrassed about the intimate nature of what he was suggesting. "That would be kind," she murmured. "Thank you." She heard him moving around, heard the soft sounds of him retrieving supplies. Then he settled nearby, and she felt him carefully arrange the torn fabric of her skirt, keeping everything modest and proper even as he worked. The gentle tug of needle and thread was rhythmic and soothing, and Eleanor drifted back into sleep with the knowledge that this strange, kind man was literally piecing her back together. When she woke again, it was to early morning light and the smell of coffee. She sat up and looked down at her dress. The repair was not professionally done, but it was neat and thorough, the tear closed with small, careful stitches. She ran her fingers over Vincent's handiwork, something warm and unfamiliar blooming in her chest. He was crouched by the fire, apparently having finally dozed off, because he startled slightly when she moved. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with tiredness. "How are you feeling?" "Better, sore but better." She gestured to her dress. "You did this." "Told you I would," he said with a slight shrug. "It is not fancy, but it will hold." "It is perfect," Eleanor said, and meant it. There was something profoundly intimate about wearing a dress he had mended while she slept, about knowing his hands had worked to restore what had been torn. "Thank you, Vincent, for everything." He looked away, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "We should eat and get moving. The trading post is about 4 hours from here, and we want to make it before afternoon heat sets in." They shared a simple breakfast of hardtack softened in coffee and the last of the dried meat. Then Vincent's saddled partner scattered the fire and helped Eleanor mount. This time, she was more aware of their closeness as he swung up behind her, more conscious of the solid warmth of him at her back and the strength in the arms that reached around her for the reins. The ride was long and hot, but Vincent kept up a steady pace, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing bits of information about the territory. He told her about the ranch where he worked, about the ornery old rancher who owned it, but had a heart of gold beneath the bluster. He told her about learning to break horses, about sleeping under the stars for weeks at a time during cattle drives, about the particular beauty of Texas sunsets that never quite captured in words. Eleanor listened and found herself sharing as well, telling him about her life in Missouri, about her mother's flower garden and her father's dry humor. She told him about learning to read when many girls were not given that opportunity, about her love of books and her secret dream of maybe one day writing stories of her own. "Why is it secret?" Vincent asked. "Seems like a fine dream to me." "Because women who write are considered strange," Eleanor said. "Blue stockings, they call them back east, unmarriageable." She felt more than heard his snort of derision. "Any man who would not want a clever wife with dreams of her own is a fool." The trading post appeared in the distance around midday, a ramshackle building with a corral and a few other structures scattered around it. Several horses were tied outside, and a wagon sat near the entrance. Vincent's posture changed subtly, became more alert as they approached. "Stay close to me inside," he murmured. "Trading posts can be rough places. Men see a woman alone and get ideas." They dismounted, and Vincent kept himself positioned between Eleanor and the other men lounging around the entrance. Inside, the trading post was dim and cluttered, smelling of tobacco, leather, and unwashed bodies. A heavy-set man with a magnificent mustache stood behind a rough wooden counter. "Vincent Keller," the man said with genuine pleasure. "Have not seen you in a month. What brings you out this way?" "Found this lady running from some outlaws yesterday," Vincent said. "She needs to get to San Antonio. Her stage coach was attacked a few days back." The trader's expression sobered. "Heard about that. Driver killed, passengers scattered. Terrible business." He looked at Eleanor with sympathy. "You are lucky Vincent found you, miss. Those are bad men." "I know," Eleanor said. "Is there any way to get word to San Antonio, to my aunt? She will be worried when I do not arrive." "Stage comes through day after tomorrow," the trader said. "I can send a letter with the driver. Who is your aunt?" "Martha Zimmerman. She runs a boarding house on Commerce Street." "I know the place," the trader said, nodding. "Good woman, Martha. I will make sure she gets word that you are safe." They spent an hour at the trading post. The trader, whose name was Bill, provided Eleanor with water to wash her face and hands and gave her a comb to work through her tangled hair. Vincent arranged to purchase passage for her on the next stage and insisted on buying her some basic supplies: a small carpet bag, a change of clothes, a bonnet to protect her from the sun. Eleanor protested the expense, but he was immovable. "Consider it a loan if you must," he said. "You can pay me back when you are settled." "How will I even find you to repay you?" she asked. He met her eyes. "I will come check on you," he said. "Make sure you arrived safely, that you have everything you need." Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. "You do not have to do that." "I know," Vincent said, "but I am going to anyway." Bill offered them a meal, and they sat at a rough table in the back room, eating stew and fresh bread. Other travelers came and went, and Eleanor could not help but notice how several of them stared at her with curiosity or speculation. Vincent noticed too, and his presence became a wall between her and their attention, polite but unyielding. As the afternoon wore on, Bill mentioned that there was a room upstairs where Eleanor could rest for the night, a proper bed and a door that locked. Vincent agreed this was the best plan, though Eleanor saw his reluctance to leave her. "The ranch is only a few hours from here," he said as they stood outside in the cooling evening air. "I will come back the day after tomorrow. Make sure you get on that stage safely." "You have already done so much," Eleanor said. "More than anyone could expect." "Maybe," Vincent allowed, "but I will worry if I do not see you safely on your way." She looked up at him, this unexpected guardian who had ridden into her nightmare and transformed it into something bearable. In the golden light of approaching sunset, he looked almost heroic, and she had to resist the urge to reach for his hand. "I do not even know how to properly thank you, Vincent. You saved my life." "You do not need to thank me," he said, but his eyes were warm. "Just promise me you will be careful. Trust Bill, but nobody else until you are with your aunt." "I promise." He lingered a moment longer, seemed to want to say something else but not finding the words. Finally, he just nodded, tipped his hat, and walked to where partner waited. Eleanor watched him ride away, feeling unexpectedly bereft, as though something important was leaving with him. The next 2 days passed slowly. Bill was kind, and his wife, who emerged from wherever she had been, was motherly and talkative. They asked no prying questions about what had happened to her, though Eleanor suspected they could guess most of it from her appearance and circumstances. She spent the time resting, eating proper meals, and trying not to count the hours until Vincent would return. He arrived early on the morning the stage was due, and Eleanor's heart leaped when she saw him ride up. He looked tired, like he had been riding hard, and she wondered if he had rushed to get here. Bill greeted him warmly and offered breakfast, which Vincent accepted but barely touched. He kept glancing at Eleanor as though making sure she was real and unharmed. "Everything all right at the ranch?" Bill asked. "Fine. Told the foreman I had personal business to attend to. He grumbled but gave me the time." The stage arrived at mid-morning, rattling into the trading post yard in a cloud of dust. The driver was a grizzled man who introduced himself as Pete, and he accepted Bill's letter for Martha with assurance that he would deliver it personally. There were two other passengers, a merchant and his wife who eyed Eleanor with polite curiosity but asked no questions. Vincent helped her into the coach, then stood with his hand on the door. "You have everything you need. Thanks to you, yes. Your aunt's address, Commerce Street." "I remember," he nodded but still did not step back. "Eleanor," he said, her name soft in his mouth. "I meant what I said. I will come check on you in a week or two once you are settled." "I will look forward to that," she said, and realized how much she meant it. "Stage is leaving, Keller," Pete called. "Say your goodbyes." Vincent stepped back reluctantly, and the door closed. As the stage lurched into motion, Eleanor leaned out the window, watching him stand there in the yard until they rounded a bend and he vanished from sight. She settled back against the uncomfortable seat, her hand pressed against the place where he had mended her dress, and wondered at the strange ache in her chest. The journey to San Antonio took a day and a half, with an overnight stop at a way station. The merchant and his wife were pleasant enough company, though Eleanor contributed little to their conversation. Her mind kept drifting back to those hours in Vincent's camp, to the safety she had felt beside his fire, to the careful way he had stitched her dress while she slept. She barely knew him, and yet she missed him with an intensity that surprised and unsettled her. San Antonio was bigger than she had expected, a sprawling city of adobe and wood buildings, wide, dusty streets filled with wagons and horses and people from all walks of life. Mexican merchants called out their wares in Spanish and English. Cowboys fresh off the trail whooped and hollered outside saloons. Respectable families in Sunday clothes walked to and from the large church that dominated the plaza. It was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once. The stage driver, true to his word, took her directly to her aunt's boarding house. It was a sturdy two-story building with a wide porch and cheerful yellow curtains in the windows. Eleanor had barely knocked on the door when it flew open and a woman swept her into a fierce embrace. "Eleanor." "Oh, thank God, thank God. We got Bill's letter yesterday and I have been beside myself with worry. Come in, let me look at you." Martha Zimmerman was in her early 50s, tall and substantial with graying brown hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes the same shade of green as Eleanor's. She ushered Eleanor inside, calling for someone named Rosa, and suddenly Eleanor was being fussed over by both her aunt and a plump Mexican woman who appeared to be the cook. "You poor child," Martha kept saying. "What you must have been through, but you are safe now, you are home. Home." Eleanor let the word wash over her as her aunt led her upstairs to a small but clean room with a real bed and clean linens and curtains that stirred in the breeze from the open window. She had not realized how much she needed to hear that word, to believe it might be true. Over the next few days, Eleanor settled into the rhythms of the boarding house. It was busy and demanding work, cooking and cleaning for the 7 men who rented rooms there, but it was also satisfying in a way her life in Missouri had never been. Her aunt was brisk but kind, and Rosa taught her to make tortillas and proper Texas chili. The boarders were mostly working men, cowboys and craftsmen, rough around the edges but respectful. Eleanor told her aunt about the attack, about Vincent finding her and helping her. Martha listened with increasing amazement. "This cowboy mended your dress while you slept?" she asked, her eyebrows raised. "He did," Eleanor confirmed, showing her the stitching. "His mother taught him to sew." Martha examined the repairs with a seamstress's eye. "These are good stitches." "Careful work." She looked up at her niece with a knowing expression. "And you say he is coming to check on you?" "He said he would," Eleanor said, trying to keep her voice casual. "In a week or two." Martha said, the sound laden with meaning. Well, I look forward to meeting this night in cowboy clothing. Eleanor felt her face heat. It is not like that. He was just being kind. If you say so, dear, her aunt said, but she was smiling. The days passed, falling into a comfortable routine. Eleanor learned the streets of San Antonio, the shops and markets. She met the neighbors and other merchants. She wrote a letter to Vincent, care of the ranch Bill had mentioned, thanking him again and giving him her address. She was not sure if he would receive it, but she felt better having sent it. 2 weeks after her arrival, Eleanor was sweeping the front porch when a familiar paint horse turned onto Commerce Street. Her heart kicked into a gallop as Vincent dismounted and tied partner to the hitching post. He had cleaned up since she last saw him, wearing what were clearly his best clothes, his hair freshly cut and face shaved clean. He looked nervous as he approached the porch, his hat in his hands. "Hello, Eleanor," he said, and just the sound of his voice saying her name made her smile. "Hello, Vincent, you came. I said I would." He shifted his weight, suddenly awkward in a way he had never been out in the wilderness. "I wanted to make sure you arrived safely, that you are well." "I am," she assured him. "Thanks to you. Come in, please. Let me introduce you to my aunt." She led him inside, acutely aware of his presence behind her, of the way the other boarders who were in the common room looked up with interest at the stranger. Martha emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, and her eyes went immediately from Eleanor's flushed face to Vincent's nervous one. "You must be Vincent Keller," she said warmly. "I am Martha Zimmerman. I cannot tell you how grateful I am for what you did for my niece." "It was nothing, madam," Vincent said. "Anyone would have done the same." "That is not even remotely true, but I appreciate the modesty," Martha said. "Have you had lunch? We were just sitting down." Vincent started to protest, but Martha would hear none of it. She installed him at the table and brought out enough food for a small army. Eleanor sat beside him, and they talked as though picking up a conversation they had started days ago rather than weeks. He told her about the ranch, about a new foal that had been born, about his ongoing efforts to save money for his own land. She told him about learning to make tortillas, about the bustling energy of San Antonio, about her plans to perhaps take in mending work to earn a little money of her own. "You could do that," Vincent said. "You are good with people, I can see that. And San Antonio is growing, always need for skilled work." They talked until the afternoon shadows grew long and Vincent finally, reluctantly, said he needed to head back to the ranch. Eleanor walked him out to the porch, neither of them seeming to want to say goodbye. "Will I see you again?" she asked, then felt foolish for being so forward, but Vincent's face lit up. "Would you want to?" "Yes," she said simply. "I would." "Then I will come back," he promised. "Next Sunday, if that is all right. Maybe I could take you for a walk, show you some of the places around town I know." "I would like that very much." He mounted partner, looked down at her with those blue eyes that had haunted her thoughts. "Until Sunday, then." "Until Sunday." She watched him ride away, and when she turned back to the house, her aunt was standing in the doorway with a satisfied expression. "That is a good man," Martha said, "the kind you do not find very often." "I know," Eleanor said softly. "I know." Sunday came, and Vincent arrived promptly at noon. He took her walking through San Antonio, showing her the missions that dotted the countryside around the city, telling her stories about the battles fought there decades before. They talked easily, naturally, the conversation flowing from serious topics to light banter and back again. He bought her a ribbon from a street vendor, pale blue like his eyes, and she tied it in her hair and treasured the way he looked at her when she did. The next Sunday he came again, and the Sunday after that. It became a pattern, these afternoons together, and Eleanor found herself living from one Sunday to the next. They walked and talked, shared meals at the boarding house where Martha and Rosa watched with approval, sometimes just sat on the porch in the evening and watched the sun set. Vincent told her about his dreams for his ranch, painting pictures with words of the house he would build, the herd he would raise. Eleanor told him about her parents, her childhood, her half-formed dreams of maybe writing something worthwhile someday. "You should do it," Vincent said one evening as they sat on the porch swing Martha had recently installed. "Write your stories. You have a way with words, Eleanor. I see it when you talk. You make things come alive." "You are biased," she teased, but she was pleased. "Maybe," he allowed. "But that does not make it less true." 3 months after that first Sunday, as autumn began to cool the fierce Texas heat, Vincent arrived looking nervous again. He barely touched the lunch Martha served, and when they went for their walk, he was quieter than usual. Finally, as they stood on a hill overlooking the city, he turned to face her. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." Her heart raced. "What is it?" "I have been saving money for almost 7 years now," he began, "working toward buying my own land, my own ranch. It has been the only goal I had, the only thing keeping me going through long days and hard work." He paused, searching for words. But somewhere along the way that changed. Somewhere between finding you in that canyon and sitting on your aunt's porch watching you laugh at something Rosa said, my dreams shifted. Now when I think about that ranch I want to build, I see you there. I see you in the house I want to build, sitting by the fire in the evening or out on the porch in the morning with coffee. I see you beside me, and I cannot imagine it any other way. Eleanor's breath caught. "Vincent, let me finish," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know I do not have much to offer yet. I am still just a ranch hand with a pocketful of savings. But I am a hard worker, and I am honest, and I would spend every day of my life making sure you never regretted choosing me. So I am asking, Eleanor Zimmerman, if you would consider being my wife." For a moment she could not speak, emotion clogging her throat. Then she reached for his hands, holding them tight. "Vincent Keller, from the moment you rode into my life, you have been nothing but kind and honorable and good. You mended my torn dress while I slept beside your fire, and somehow you have been mending my torn heart ever since. Yes, yes, I will marry you." The joy that spread across his face was like sunrise. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and when he finally loosened his grip enough to look down at her, his eyes were bright. "I will make you happy," he promised. "I swear it." "You already do," she told him, and then he was kissing her, soft and sure and perfect. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church near the plaza, with Martha and Rosa and Vincent's sister Sarah and her family present. It was a simple ceremony, but filled with joy and love. Eleanor wore a new dress that Martha had sewn for her, and Vincent wore his best suit, his eyes never leaving his bride's face. When the priest pronounced them married, and Vincent kissed her as her husband for the first time, Eleanor felt a completeness she had never known before, as though all the broken pieces of her life had finally been made whole. They moved into a small house Vincent rented on the outskirts of San Antonio. It was not much, just 2 rooms and a lean-to for partner, but to Eleanor it felt like a palace. She continued helping her aunt at the boarding house most days, and Vincent kept working at the ranch, but their evenings were their own. They would cook simple meals together, Vincent surprisingly competent in the kitchen thanks to years of trail cooking. They would sit on their little porch and watch the stars come out. They would lie in bed and talk about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. Winter came, mild by Missouri standards but cool enough to require fires in the evenings. Eleanor did take in mending work as she had planned and discovered she had a talent for it. Word spread, and soon she had regular customers, including several of the wealthy families in town. The money she earned went straight into their savings, added to Vincent's careful accumulation. One evening in late January, as they sat by the fire, Vincent pulled out a worn leather notebook and opened it to show her. "I have been looking at land," he said. "There is a piece about 30 miles northwest of here, 500 acres with good water and grazing. The owner is willing to sell for a fair price." He paused. "With what we have saved, and if we are careful, we could buy it come spring." Eleanor looked at the numbers he had written, the careful calculations. "This is your dream," she said softly. "Our dream now. Are we truly ready?" "I think so," Vincent said. "It will be hard at first. We will have to build the house ourselves, start small with the herd. But we can do it, Eleanor, together." She looked up at him, this man who had become her whole world, and smiled. "Then let's do it. Let's build our ranch." The next months were a whirlwind of activity. Vincent negotiated the land purchase, worked extra hours to earn additional money, made careful plans for everything they would need. Eleanor continued her mending work and helped Martha at the boarding house. They spent evenings planning the house they would build, sketching designs by firelight, arguing good-naturedly about the placement of windows and the size of the porch. In April, the land officially became theirs. Vincent took Eleanor out to see it, riding together on partner through rolling hills covered in spring wildflowers. The property had a small creek running through it, several stands of live oak trees, and endless views of big Texas sky. They stood on a rise that Vincent had identified as the perfect spot for the house, and he pointed out where everything would go. "The house here, barn there, corrals over that way. We will start with a small herd, maybe 20 head, and build from there. In a few years, we could have 100 head, maybe more." He pulled her close, tucking her under his arm. "What do you think?" "I think it is perfect," Eleanor said, and meant it. "I think this is home." They moved onto the land in May, living in a tent while they worked from dawn to dusk building the house. Sarah's husband and some of Vincent's friends from the ranch came to help with the heavy work, raising walls and roof beams. Eleanor learned to mix adobe and lay bricks. She cooked for the workers, planned the interior layout, made curtains from fabric bought in San Antonio. It was back-breaking work, but satisfying in a way nothing else had ever been. They were literally building their life together, board by board, brick by brick. By late summer, the house was finished enough to move into. It was simple but solid, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, a bedroom, and a small room that Vincent insisted would be a study for Eleanor where she could write. The furniture was sparse and mostly handmade, but it was theirs. On their first night sleeping in their own house on their own land, Eleanor lay in Vincent's arms and felt a happiness so complete it almost frightened her. "What are you thinking?" Vincent murmured, his hand gently stroking her hair. "That I cannot believe this is real," she admitted. "A year ago I was running for my life in the desert. Now I am here with you in this house we built. It feels like a dream." "It is real," he assured her. "You are real, I am real, and this life we are building together is real. And it is only going to get better." They bought their first cattle in September, 20 heifers and 1 bull, the beginning of their herd. Vincent threw himself into the work with passion and dedication, and Eleanor discovered she had a natural way with the animals. She named each cow, much to Vincent's amusement, and could tell them apart even when he could not. They hired a young Mexican cowboy named Carlos to help with the heavier ranch work, and he built himself a small cabin near the creek. Autumn came, and with it Eleanor's first indication that their family might be growing. She missed her monthly courses, then missed them again. Her breasts became tender, and she felt tired in a way that no amount of sleep seemed to fix. When she finally confessed her suspicions to Vincent, his face went through a range of emotions: shock and joy and fear and wonder. "A baby," he said, as though testing the words. "We are going to have a baby, I think so," Eleanor said, nervous about his reaction. "Are you happy?" He pulled her into his arms so fast she squeaked. "Happy, Eleanor, I am terrified and thrilled and so full of love I think I might burst. A baby, our baby." The months of her pregnancy were challenging. Morning sickness plagued her through the first 3 months, and the work of running the ranch did not stop just because she was growing a child. But Vincent was endlessly patient and supportive, taking over the heavier tasks without complaint, making sure she rested when she needed to. Martha came to visit often, bringing supplies and advice and much-needed female companionship. Their son was born on a stormy night in April, almost exactly 2 years after that day in the canyon when Vincent had ridden into Eleanor's life. The labor was long and difficult, with only Martha and Rosa there to help. But when Eleanor finally held her baby in her arms, every moment of pain was forgotten. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that she knew would eventually turn the same blue as his father's. Vincent, who had paced holes in the floor while waiting, came into the bedroom with tears streaming down his face when Martha finally allowed him in. He approached the bed as though walking on sacred ground, looking down at his wife and son with such awe and love that Eleanor started crying too. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand with one calloused finger. "You are perfect. God, Eleanor, I love you both so much." "What should we name him?" Eleanor asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Vincent was quiet for a moment, looking at his son. "How about James, after your father?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "You would do that. Your father helped raise the woman I love," Vincent said simply. "Seems right to honor him." So James Vincent Keller became the newest addition to their family. He was a good baby, content and curious, and Vincent proved to be a devoted father. Eleanor would often find him in the middle of the night, sitting by the window with James in his arms, talking softly to the infant about the ranch, about the horses, about the kind of man he hoped his son would become. Life settled into a new rhythm. The ranch continued to grow, the herd increasing each year. They built a proper barn, expanded the house to include 2 more rooms. Carlos brought his wife and children to live on the property, and suddenly there was a small community forming on their land. Eleanor started writing in earnest, stories about the West and the people who lived there, and to her shock and delight, a newspaper in Austin agreed to publish several of them. When James was 2, Eleanor became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter was born on a beautiful October morning with much less drama than her brother's arrival. They named her Catherine Rose, and she came into the world with Eleanor's green eyes and a stubborn streak that made her father laugh with recognition. The years flowed by, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses and followed his father everywhere. Catherine was wild and fearless, more likely to be found climbing trees than playing with dolls. Eleanor's writing career flourished, and eventually she published a collection of stories that earned enough money to buy additional land and increase their herd significantly. Vincent's hair began to show silver at the temples, and Eleanor noticed laugh lines around her own eyes when she looked in the mirror. But they were happy lines, earned through years of laughter and love. The ranch was thriving, recognized as one of the best cattle operations in the region. They had become established members of the community, respected and well-liked. On a warm evening in late spring, when James was 10 and Catherine was 8, The family sat on the porch of their home watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The children were arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to feed the chickens, and Vincent had his arm around Eleanor's shoulders, her head resting on his chest. "You remember," Eleanor said softly, "that first night, when you mended my dress while I slept beside your fire?" "Every detail," Vincent said. "I looked at you sleeping there, this beautiful, brave woman who had survived something terrible, and I thought you were the strongest person I had ever seen. I never imagined that 6 months later I would love you, that we would build all of this together." Eleanor turned to look up at him. "I was so scared that night. I thought I had lost everything. I did not know that I was about to find everything that mattered." "We found each other," Vincent said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Everything else came from that. Mama, Papa, look." Catherine called, pointing to where a deer had emerged from the trees near the creek. "Can we go see?" "After you feed the chickens," Eleanor said, but she was smiling. "Both of you." The children raced off, still arguing, and Vincent chuckled. "They are going to be a handful when they are older." "They already are," Eleanor said, "but I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," Vincent agreed. "Not one single thing." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the world in gold. The ranch spread out before them, the result of years of hard work and shared dreams. Cattle grazed in the distance. The horses whinnied in the corral. Somewhere Catherine shrieked with laughter and James told her to hush before she scared the deer. Eleanor thought about the path that had brought her here, from that terrifying day in the canyon to this perfect evening on the porch of the home she and Vincent had built together. She thought about the dress he had mended while she slept, about the careful stitches that had held torn fabric together. In so many ways, that was what they had done for each other. They had taken the torn, broken pieces of their separate lives and stitched them together into something whole and beautiful and strong. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, that familiar question that had become a ritual between them over the years. "How much I love you," Eleanor said simply. "How grateful I am that you rode into my life that day." "Best day of my life," Vincent said. "Well, tied with our wedding day, and the days our children were born, and about 100 other days with you." Eleanor laughed and swatted his chest playfully. "Charmer." "Only for you," he said, and kissed her as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges and joys. James grew into a fine young man, sensible and hardworking, who eventually took over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch. Catherine proved to be as wild as her parents feared and as capable as they hoped, becoming an accomplished rider who could rope and brand with the best of the cowboys. Both children eventually married, bringing new members into the family. James chose a schoolteacher from San Antonio, a gentle woman named Alice who brought laughter and learning into their lives. Catherine married one of the neighboring ranchers' sons, a young man who was one of the few people who could keep up with her spirit. Grandchildren arrived, filling the house with noise and chaos and love. Vincent built a larger porch so the whole family could gather there in the evenings. Eleanor continued writing, her stories now focused on the history of their ranch and the people who had built their lives in Texas. She had become something of a local celebrity, though she remained humble about her accomplishments. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Eleanor back to the canyon where he had found her. They rode together on Partner, now an old horse but still willing. The canyon looked different in daylight, without the fear and desperation that had colored it in her memory. They stood on the ridge where Vincent had sat with his rifle, looking down at the path she had run. "I think about that day often," Vincent said. "About what would have happened if I had been tracking that mare in a different direction, if I had been an hour later, We might never have met. But you were there, Eleanor said, taking his hand. You were exactly where you needed to be, exactly when you needed to be there. I have to believe that was not just chance. Fate, Vincent asked, a slight smile playing on his lips. Love, Eleanor corrected. I think love finds a way, even in the most unlikely circumstances. Even in the wilderness of Texas with outlaws chasing and no hope in sight. Love found a way to bring us together. They stayed there for a while, remembering and reflecting, before riding back to the ranch where their family waited. That evening, all their children and grandchildren gathered for a celebration. The house overflowed with people and laughter, food and music. Vincent and Eleanor danced under the stars, moving slowly to a tune James played on his guitar, surrounded by the life they had built together. More years passed. Vincent's hair turned completely silver, and Eleanor's hands developed arthritis that made sewing difficult. But they still sat on the porch each evening, still talked about everything and nothing, still looked at each other with the same love that had bloomed beside a fire in the wilderness decades before. On a cool autumn evening, when Vincent was 63 and Eleanor was 59, they sat together watching another spectacular sunset. The ranch now sprawled across several thousand acres, the herd numbered in the hundreds, and their legacy was secure through their children and grandchildren. They had built something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. "Do you have any regrets?" Eleanor asked, a question she had never thought to ask before. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, considering. "Only that I did not find you sooner," he finally said. "That we did not have more years together. But I suppose that is greedy, is it not? We have had 25 wonderful years. Not everyone gets even one." "No regrets about the ranch you dreamed of as a young man," Eleanor pressed. "About the sacrifices we made to build this life, sacrifices." Vincent repeated, sounding genuinely puzzled. "Eleanor, every choice I made, every hour of hard work, every challenge we faced, it was all in service of the life I wanted most. A life with you. I got everything I dreamed of and more than I ever imagined was possible. What could I possibly regret?" Eleanor smiled and settled more comfortably against his side. "When you say things like that, you make it very difficult for a woman to stay dignified and composed." "Good," Vincent said, his voice warm with affection. "After 25 years of marriage, I hope I can still make your heart race." "Always," Eleanor promised. "Every single day." They sat in silence as darkness fell and the stars emerged, the same stars that had watched over them that first night in the wilderness. The sounds of their ranch surrounded them. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses moving in the corral, the soft murmur of voices from the bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived. It was the sound of home, of family, of a dream realized through love and persistence, an unwavering commitment to each other. Inside the house, they could hear Catherine and Alice preparing supper, their voices raised in some good-natured argument about the proper way to season a roast. James was in the barn with his oldest son, teaching the boy how to properly care for the leather on a saddle. The younger grandchildren were playing some elaborate game that involved a great deal of shrieking and laughter. Life pulsed and thrived all around them, the direct result of two people finding each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. As they finally rose to go inside for supper, Vincent paused and pulled Eleanor close, wrapping her in his arms the way he had done countless times over the years. She fit against him perfectly, as though they had been made for exactly this for each other. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" Eleanor asked, though she thought she knew. "For running into that canyon," Vincent said. "For surviving until I could find you. For saying yes when I asked you to marry me. For building this life with me. For every day, every moment, every breath we have shared. Thank you for being my wife, my partner, my love." Eleanor felt tears sting her eyes. "The privilege has been entirely mine, Vincent Keller. You rode into my darkest moment and brought light. You mended my torn dress and somehow mended my torn spirit. You gave me a home and a family and a love I never dreamed possible. I am the one who should be saying thank you." "Then we are even," Vincent said and kissed her gently. "Come on. I smell Catherine's famous biscuits, and if we do not get in there soon, the grandchildren will eat them all." They walked inside together, hand in hand, to the warmth and chaos of family supper. The table was crowded, chairs added from other rooms to accommodate everyone. Grace was said, food was passed, conversations overlapped and interrupted each other. It was loud and messy and perfect. Eleanor looked around the table at the faces of her children and grandchildren, at the man beside her who had been her rock and her joy for over 2 decades, and felt a contentment so profound it was almost overwhelming. This was what she had been running toward that day in the canyon, even though she had not known it. Not away from death, but toward life, toward love, toward home. As the evening wound down and family members began to drift away to their own homes and beds, Eleanor and Vincent performed their nightly ritual of walking through the house, checking windows and doors, banking the fire. They moved around each other with the practiced ease of long partnership, anticipating needs and movements without conscious thought. In their bedroom, Eleanor sat at her small dressing table, brushing out her hair, now streaked with silver. Vincent came up behind her and took the brush from her hands, performing the task with gentle strokes. It was something he had done since their first year of marriage, a small intimacy that had become sacred through repetition. "I saw you looking at that old dress today," Vincent said quietly. "The green one." Eleanor met his eyes in the mirror. She had indeed taken out her old traveling dress, the one she had been wearing the day he found her, the one he had mended beside his fire. She kept it wrapped in tissue in the bottom of her trunk, unable to part with it despite its age and the painful memories it could have represented. "I was remembering," she admitted, "thinking about how much has changed since that day." "Everything changed," Vincent said, "and nothing changed. I am still the man who would do anything to keep you safe. You are still the strongest, bravest woman I have ever known. We are still choosing each other, every single day." "Every single day," Eleanor echoed, reaching up to cover his hand with hers. They climbed into bed, and Eleanor curled into Vincent's side as naturally as breathing. His arm came around her, holding her close, and she listened to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. It was the same sound that had comforted her on countless nights, through good times and hard times, through every season of their life together. "Vincent," she said into the darkness, "MMM. If you could go back to that day in the canyon, knowing everything that would come after, would you still ride down to help me?" She felt him shift, felt his lips press against her forehead. "Eleanor, I would ride through hell itself to find you, every time, without hesitation. You are my beginning and my end, my purpose and my joy. Of course I would come for you. I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he replied, "now and always." They drifted off to sleep together, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a life that would endure long after they were gone. Outside, the Texas stars shone down on the ranch they had created, on the legacy of love they were leaving behind. The wind whispered through the live oak trees, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. And in the morning, they would wake together as they had for 25 years, ready to face another day side by side. Ready to continue the story that had begun beside a campfire in the wilderness, when a cowboy had mended a torn dress, and in doing so, had mended 2 broken hearts. Their love story was not one of grand gestures or dramatic proclamations, but of steady devotion, daily choice, and the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they belonged. Together, now and always, in the wild heart of Texas where their love had taken root and flourished beyond anything either of them could have imagined.